Story 1. I used to enjoy the hustle and bustle of New Year's Eve, the cacophony of cheers and fireworks, the streets alive with celebration. I worked as a night guard at the old Marley building, a job that suited my solitary nature. But after last New Year's Eve, everything changed. The old Marley building was a hulking structure, abandoned for years and rumored to be haunted. Its empty halls echoed with the whispers of the past. That night, as the city prepared to usher in the new year, I settled into my routine, walking the dark corridors, flashlight in hand. As the clock edged closer to midnight, I heard the front door creak open. I wasn't expecting anyone. The building was supposed to be sealed. I made my way down, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. That's when I saw them, a couple dressed in vintage clothes, like characters from an old noir film. "Hello, can I help you?" I called out, my voice echoing off the walls. "We're here to see the new year in," the man replied, his voice smooth but with an unsettling edge. I explained that the building was off limits, dangerous even, but they insisted, handing me a wad of old, crinkled notes. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let them stay for a while, watch the fireworks from one of the upper floors. They smiled, their eyes not quite meeting mine, and walked past me into the depths of the building. I followed at a distance, watching as they made their way up the grand staircase, their footsteps silent. They seemed to know exactly where they were going, navigating the decrepit halls with an eerie familiarity. I hesitated, then followed them up. We reached the top floor, the city's lights twinkling through the broken windows. The couple stood close together, watching the horizon. I lingered in the doorway, feeling like an intruder in a moment that wasn't meant for me. As the city counted down to midnight, fireworks burst into the sky, their reflections dancing in the shattered glass. But in the glow, the couple vanished. I blinked, disbelieving, but they were gone, leaving behind the echo of a laugh, or maybe a sob. I searched the building top to bottom, but found no trace. They had disappeared as mysteriously as they had arrived. I returned to the ground floor, the weight of the building's silence pressing down on me. The next day I asked around, but no one knew anything about the couple. The building remained empty, its stories untold. I continued my job, but the nights were longer, the shadows deeper. As the year passed, the dread grew. What if they came back? What if they brought something back with them? I couldn't shake the feeling that the building with all its secrets had ensnared me too. When New Year's Eve came again, I couldn't face the building. I called in sick, stayed home, but the fear followed me. I watched the celebrations on TV, the sound muted, jumping at every noise outside. I don't work there anymore, can't bring myself to walk those halls again. But sometimes, when the night is quiet, I hear whispers like a conversation just out of reach, and I wonder about the old Marley building, about what walks its empty rooms, waiting for the clock to strike midnight. So I tell this story not as a warning, but as a plea. Be wary of the places you enter, the mysteries you awaken. Some doors once opened can never be closed, and some visitors once welcomed never leave. Story 2.
But every New Year's Eve, as we count down to midnight, I can't help but glance towards the attic. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I hear a child's laughter echoing through the old halls. We remain in the house, respectful of its past, mindful of its memories. For in every corner, in every shadow, lies a story, and some are not meant to be forgotten. As night fell, things got weirder. Tim, who's usually glued to his video games, kept looking out the window, saying he saw someone wandering outside. I teased him at first, but when I looked, I saw footprints in the snow leading to the house, yet none leading away. I told my parents, but they said it must have been an animal. But deep down, I knew no deer walked on 2 feet like that. The atmosphere was tense, and I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. We tried to keep the mood light, playing board games and listening to music. But as we counted down to midnight, a loud bang came from the attic. It sounded like something heavy had fallen. Dad went up to check, cursing about old houses and their surprises. He found an old trunk open, stuff spilled out. But the thing is, we never touched it. It was always locked, a family heirloom or something. He just pushed the stuff back in, locked the trunk, and returned, trying to laugh it off. Just after midnight, the real scare began. The power flickered out, plunging us into darkness. The only light was the fire's glow. Then, a child's laughter echoed through the house, chilling and clear. My brother was right next to me, just as scared. We huddled together, and my parents tried to find candles. The laughter continued, moving around the house, never staying in one place. I felt a cold breeze every time it passed, even though all windows and doors were shut tight. Mom found candles, and we lit them, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows. That's when we noticed the photos on the mantel were all turned down. Nobody admitted to touching them. We tried to rationalize, to think logically, but fear was taking over. The laughter turned into whispers, unintelligible but definitely human, or at least it used to be. We couldn't understand what it was saying, but it felt like it was right in our ears, breathing down our necks. Tim was the first to see her. A little girl, no more than 10, standing in the corner of the room, staring at us. She was pale, almost transparent, and her eyes were hollow. We all saw her, and nobody moved. She just stood there, then vanished as quickly as she appeared. The temperature dropped, and the fire flickered wildly. I heard my mom praying under her breath, something about spirits and protection. Dad decided we should leave, not caring about the storm outside. But when we tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge, like something was holding it shut. Windows, too, were stuck. It was like the house wanted us there. Panic set in. We were trapped, with whatever was haunting us. The laughter returned, louder now, mocking. The whispers became cries, and the temperature kept dropping. Our breaths turned to mist, and frost formed on the inside of the windows. We retreated to the living room, the only room with the fireplace still lit. We stayed there, huddled together, listening to the sounds of the house. It felt like the place was alive, breathing with a heavy, raspy breath. The photos continued to fall, one by one, until none were left standing. And the little girl, she appeared again, this time closer. We could see her clearly, her dress tattered, her eyes empty pools of darkness. She didn't speak, just stared, and then was gone again. Hours passed, or at least it felt like hours. The storm outside raged on, but inside the haunting continued. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. We were freezing one moment and sweating the next. The little girl appeared and disappeared, never speaking, just watching us with those hollow eyes. My parents were terrified, trying to protect us. But what can you do against a ghost? When dawn finally broke, the haunting seemed to pause. We were exhausted, scared, and confused. We didn't speak much, just packed our things and left as soon as the door opened. The drive back was silent. Nobody knew what to say. When we got home, we found scratches on the car's roof like someone or something had been holding on as we drove away. We never went back to the cabin. It was put up for sale, but nobody bought it. The story became a family secret, something we never discussed. But every New Year's, I remember that night. The laughing, the cold, the little girl's hollow eyes. I don't know what happened or why, but I know I'll never feel comfortable on New Year's Eve again. And sometimes, late at night, I think I hear her laughter, drifting on the wind, a reminder of the night we will never forget.
Story 3.
New Year's Eve was always a grand affair in our family, and this time we decided to ring in the new year at the old homestead, a sprawling, creaky house that had been in our family for generations. Nestled deep in the woods, it had an eerie charm, with its Victorian architecture and the legends that surrounded it. I thought it would be good for the kids to connect with their roots, even if those roots were a bit shadowed and twisted. My daughter Sarah was immediately drawn to an ancient family album she discovered in the dusty library, her fingers tracing the faces of long-gone relatives. "Who's this?" she asked, pointing at a severe-looking woman dressed in black. "That's your great-great-grandmother Mabel," I said. She was known to be quite the mystic. Sarah's eyes widened with curiosity, and I felt a shiver as I glanced at the stern portrait. Little did I know, this innocent interaction would invoke a series of chilling events. As the evening progressed, we indulged in family traditions and recounted old tales by the fireplace. The children eventually grew weary, and Sarah insisted on sleeping in the attic room, the very place where she found the album. Despite my initial reluctance, I agreed, tucking her in and kissing her forehead, unaware of the restless spirits that lingered in the shadows. The clock struck 12, and as we toasted to the new year, a sudden gust of icy wind blew through the house, extinguishing the candles and sending a tremor of unease through my spine. "Must be the old wiring," I murmured, though the air felt charged with a sinister energy. We retired to bed, but sleep eluded me. Later that night, I awoke to a chilling sensation and faint, indistinct whispering. Compelled by a force I couldn't understand, I found myself ascending the creaking stairs to the attic. The door was slightly ajar, creaking softly, as if inviting me in. My heart pounded as I pushed it open to reveal a shocking scene. Sarah was sitting up in bed, conversing with an empty rocking chair that moved rhythmically on its own. "She says she used to sleep here," Sarah whispered, her eyes unfocused and distant. "Who, Sarah?" I asked, a cold dread washing over me. "Great-great-grandma Mabel," she replied, pointing to the vacant chair. I quickly scooped Sarah up, fleeing the room as the temperature plummeted, and an ethereal laugh echoed through the hallways. The next day, Sarah had no recollection of the night, but she clung to Mabel's photograph with an unsettling insistence. Bizarre occurrences began to plague our days. Objects moved on their own, eerie shadows flickered in the corners, and an oppressive sadness filled the house. Sarah's behavior grew increasingly peculiar. She would wander the house at odd hours, her once bright eyes now hollow and distant. Determined to protect my family, I delved into the house's past, uncovering grim tales of Mabel's obsession with the occult. It was said she vanished under mysterious circumstances, her spirit bound to the house, forever seeking companionship in the earthly realm. As the supernatural disturbances escalated, I realized we were in grave danger. One particularly harrowing night, I confronted the malevolent spirit, demanding it release its grip on Sarah. The house trembled with rage, and a horrifying apparition of Mabel materialized, her face contorted in fury. I felt an invisible force constricting my throat, my breaths becoming ragged gasps. In a desperate plea, I invoked the love and memories of our family, begging the spirits for mercy. As quickly as it had escalated, the haunting ceased. The apparition faded away, and the house fell silent, the malevolent presence receding into the darkness. We left at dawn, the morning light casting long shadows across the forsaken homestead. Though we never returned, the terror of that night lingered. Each year, as New Year's Eve approaches, a sense of dread envelops me, and I wonder if Mabel still roams the corridors waiting for someone to join her in the eternal loneliness of the afterlife. Sarah, now older, Occasionally speaks of dreams where she's wandering the old house, her great-great-grandmother's ghostly hand guiding her through the dimly lit halls. We've moved on, but the scars remain, a chilling reminder of the night when the past reached out, threatening to drag us into its dark embrace. And so we continue, forever wary of the thin veil that separates the living from the restless dead, especially on the night when one year dies and another is born.
Story 2.
I'll never forget that New Year's Eve. We had just moved into an old house in a quaint little town. It was spacious and a bit run down, but perfect for our family with its sprawling yard and numerous rooms. We were thrilled, thinking of the potential. My wife, 2 kids, and I decided to host a New Year's party as a way to meet the neighbors and start fresh. As the evening approached, the house filled with laughter and music. Our kids, Amy and Jake, ran around with their new friends, the house alive with celebration. We had heard rumors about the house being the oldest in the neighborhood, with a long, somewhat murky history, but we shrugged it off as local lore. As midnight neared, the kids grew restless. They wanted to explore every nook and cranny of the old house. I warned them to stay away from the attic and basement, the 2 places we hadn't fully inspected yet. But kids will be kids, and amidst the festivities, Jake slipped away unnoticed. When the clock struck 12, everyone cheered, hugged, and wished each other a happy new year. But then we noticed Jake was missing. Panic set in as we searched the house. I found him standing in the attic, pale and shaking, staring at an old mirror propped against the wall. "Jake, what happened?" I asked, rushing to him. "There was a boy in the mirror," he whispered. "He said he used to live here." Chills ran down my spine. The attic was cold, dust swirling in the air. I looked into the mirror but saw only our reflections. I scooped Jake up and hurried downstairs. The party continued, but my mind was elsewhere. After the guests left, my wife and I sat down, trying to make sense of it. That's when we heard a soft, sad melody playing from nowhere. We followed the sound to the living room. The old piano, which came with the house, was playing by itself. Over the next few days, strange things continued to happen. Doors would open and close, lights flicker, and at night we'd hear whispers like conversations happening just out of sight. We started researching the house's history and found out about a family who lived here a century ago. They had a son, about Jake's age, who died tragically one winter. The townsfolk whispered about the family, about sorrow and hauntings. It seemed absurd, but what we were experiencing was hard to deny. One night, I woke to find Jake sleepwalking, heading to the attic. I followed, heart pounding. He stood before the mirror, speaking softly. "He's lonely," Jake mumbled. "He wants to play." I didn't know what to do. I reached out, touching the cold glass, and for a moment I saw him, the boy Jake described, looking back with sad eyes. I gasped, and the vision vanished. We consulted with local priests, mediums, anyone who might help. They cleansed the house, performed rituals, and slowly, the occurrences faded. Jake stopped mentioning the boy, and life returned to normal. But every New Year's Eve, as we count down to midnight, I can't help but glance towards the attic. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I hear a child's laughter, echoing through the old halls. We remain in the house, respectful of its past, mindful of its memories. For in every corner, in every shadow, lies a story, and some are not meant to be forgotten.